Hello, friend. Welcome to ABN SAT's Trinity channel for another episode of Colliding Worldviews. Today is Monday, September 11th, and the year of our Lord of 2017. And as usual, it's a blessing to have all of you here for another great show and another great guest, which is what we have every single week. So if you have friends, family, neighbors, coworkers, classmates, etc., who don't know about ABN and the Trinity channel, please let them know. Let them know that we have weekly shows on the Trinity channel, which is all of our English shows. We have other shows in Arabic and Aramaic and Kurdish and other languages as well. But all of the English shows can be found on the Trinity channel. That's trinitychannel.com. They can download the free app, the ABN SAT app, on a lot of different Android, iPhone, smartphone devices, smart TVs, Apple TV, Amazon Fire Stick TV, Roku, the list goes on and on. And of course, we're also flowing through satellite to the Middle East, North Africa, Australia, New Zealand, and of course, United States and Canada as well. And that continues to grow. We thank you for your prayers and your support, which allow these shows to continue every single week. And again, we want you to please stay tuned to the Trinity channel for the upcoming second International Apologetics Marathon of 2017, which is scheduled for October 2nd through 6th. We're having 3, 4, 5 shows each day, Monday through Friday. A lot of great topics, a lot of great guests are being lined up now. So please let others know about that as well, because that only happens twice a year. Usually March and September, but this year because we have so many events going on, it's been moved a little bit back towards into October. So October 2nd through 6th is when we are having that marathon. But today, my guest is a man who is not unknown to Christians who love Muslims and want to reach them with the gospel of the Lord Jesus Christ and look to scholarly sources to help equip them to reach out to Muslims and to also equip other Christians to reach Muslims as well. Today's topic for Colliding Worldviews is Islam's growing crisis, and my guest is Dr. Mark Durie. Dr. Durie is an Anglican pastor based in Melbourne, Australia. He is an academic, human rights activist, a Shillman Ginsburg Writing Fellow at the Middle East Forum, and adjunct research fellow at the Arthur Jeffrey Center for the Study of Islam at Melbourne School of Theology. He has published many articles and books on Christian-Muslim relations, Islam, and religious freedom. He holds a doctorate in linguistics from the National University and a doctorate on the theology of the Quran from the Australian College of Theology. He has held visiting appointments at the University of Leiden, I believe it's called, or pronounced, I should say, MIT, UCLA, and Stanford, and was elected a Fellow of the Australian Academy of the Humanities in 1992. Before I give you some more info about him, Dr. Durie, welcome to Colliding Worldviews.
Thank you, Tony. It's good to be with you.
It's a blessing to have you here. I know our viewers are going to love it as well. We have a lot of great information to cover. But first, Dr. Durie, I want to point people to your website and some of your resources. Friends, if you haven't heard of Dr. Mark Durie, please check out his website, markdurie.com. We're going to have that on the lower third for you as well at the bottom of your screen, so be able to check that out at any time during the show or after the show especially. And I also want to point you to some resources which are available there. If you go to the website, I'm going to go there right now real quick. Again, markdurie.com. Up there at the top, you'll see a tab that says Books and DVDs. And if you go there, you can actually purchase a couple that I'm going to hold up for you right now. And I believe we have pictures to show you on the screen as well. The first one is his book, The Third Choice, Islam, Dimitude, and Freedom. Here's a kind of a far away picture, but we have a picture, I'm sure, to show you on the screen here as well. And this is a very popular book that Dr. Durie wrote a number of years ago. So I definitely encourage you to pick that up. Again, you can get it at his website, markdurie.com. And also a DVD. If any of you out there don't like to read, you like to watch DVDs, here's one. It's called Sister Religions and What You Should Know About Islam. We have a picture of that for you there as well. It says on the back here, Sister Religions, question mark. It's not what you think. As a battle of ideologies rages across the Middle East, many people are asking the questions, do Muslims and Christians worship the same God? Are Judaism, Christianity, and Islam sister religions? They may sound like simple questions, but they are not. In this interview with Dr. Mark Durie, he answers these and many other key questions. You have 3 choices. Which will you choose? Again, pick up his books. He has other books as well in addition to The Third Choice and this DVD at markdurie.com. You're going to love the information that he has. But Dr. Dury, it's a blessing to have you here, and I really look forward to the information that you're going to be sharing with our viewers. We have a lot of Muslim viewers around the world, and we, of course, have a lot of Christians, both Arab Christians and non-Arab Christians, who have a heart for Muslims and want to reach them. And I want to ask you, because Islam, many people say, is the fastest growing religion in the world. There's, approximately 1.6 billion Muslims in the world. I keep hearing that number slightly go up a little bit. Of course, it's not as many as Christians. But what is attractive about Islam? And what does it actually offer to its followers or to its potential followers if somebody becomes a Muslim?
Well, Islam has a view that human beings are basically weak and need guidance and easily led astray. And it promises guidance. So it offers a pathway on which to walk. And the outcome of that, if it's followed, according to Islam, is success in this life and the next. So being on the right path leading to a successful life, which in traditional Islamic understanding included for the Islamic community dominance in this world and political success, conquest of the enemies, and a dominant political outcome too for the Muslim community. That's the traditional teaching of Islam.
Okay. And what does Islam say is the destiny of other religions, anything other than Islam, for all the Christians and Jews and Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses, and all the other religious groups who are around the world?
Well, the Quran says that Muhammad was sent with the religion of truth to make it to triumph over other religions. So the expectation within Islam is that eventually other religions will be vanquished or be subjugated to Islam. Islam also says, the Quran also teaches that Muslims are the best people that Allah has provided for the world. They command what's right. They forbid what's wrong. So they have a sort of manifest destiny to guide the world, the rest of the world, and to demonstrate the authority and the truth of their faith by a dominance over other religions. So for specifically for Christians and Jews, the Quran teaches that they would come under the political dominance of Islam. There's a key verse in the Quran, verse 929, which says to Muslims, fight against the people of the book, that is Christians and Jews, until they are, that is if they don't agree to follow Islam, until they pay tribute and are subjugated, humiliated under Islam's rule. So Islam has a destiny to rule according to its own authoritative sources.
Okay, and I know that you are down under in the great area of Australia, and we thank God for technology that allows you to be here with us today. Dr. Dury, I'm sure you've probably kept up with what's happening here in the West, in the United States and Canada. Just as a follow-up question to what you had just said, Islam and its ultimate goal is to dominate. Here in America, we see that a lot of Muslim groups who you consider nominal or moderate, quote unquote, seem to be working with a lot of other groups out there. And it doesn't matter if it's race-based, if it's sexual orientation-based, or anything else. But they seem to be working with every single group, or maybe minority group, other than Christians. You see CARE, the Council on American Islamic Relations, and people like that, who will stick up for anyone based on religion or race or anything else, but you never see them stick up for a Christian. So how do you codify this theology of Islam wanting to dominate with what we are at least currently seeing in the West as these groups working together?
I think the strategy of Islamic communities varies depending on their political and military capacity. So if a Muslim community is in a very dominant position, then they'll use one strategy. If they're in a politically weak position, a minority position, they'll use another strategy. And for those, not all Muslims share the view that I've described, that is, that Islam should rule, but many do. And for those who are in a minority position in the West, so for example in the United States, their immediate goal or intention would be to establish Islam within the society and to build its reputation, its prestige, its influence. And part of that would involve establishing partnerships with other groups, relationships, positive relationships that would enable the Islamic community to flourish and thrive and grow in strength and influence. So the way politics works in the West is there is an advantage to be gained by using the minority politics track. So there's an advantage to Muslim community to present themselves as a minority, perhaps a persecuted minority, and also to make common cause with other groups that are in a comparable position, at least in the understanding of Western people. So this is a very understandable strategy that Muslims would use. As for partnering with Christians and why they haven't done that, it's possible because one of the reasons is there's some suspicion of Muslims from some of the more dominant Christian groups. There might be some reluctance to partner from that perspective. One of the problems for Islam's reputation in the West is that in Muslim countries, Christians are generally persecuted, and that's increasingly familiar to people, to Christians in America, and that creates some challenges for connecting with and partnering with Christian organizations. And that's an issue that Muslims themselves find quite hard to answer. You know, if Muslims in America are challenged about why are Christians in Pakistan so badly treated, or why can't the Christians in Saudi Arabia build a church, these are quite difficult issues for Muslims in the United States to really give an answer to. And I think that creates some difficulties in their relationship with Christian groups.
And we definitely see that there are a lot of what you would consider moderate or nominal Muslims, of course, in the entire world, but of course here in America as well, where they're living under a constitutional republic and not under Sharia. Although, of course, we do see this creeping Sharia in different parts of the United States and stuff like that. But we also see this the dawah that's going on here. There's a book published in 1989 called The Methodology of Dawah, and it basically talks about how to make Islam palatable to the West, acceptable to the West. And it mentions things like that, like building relationships with different groups, with political groups, with law enforcement, and basically building relationships with people, which, of course, building relationships is always a good thing. I mean, we see so many people get, move into the different man-made religions out there because a relationship is built with someone who follows that religion, and they're nice, and hey, I'm looking for truth, and this seems like truth. And we see a lot of people falling into these different man-made religions because of that. But of course, you, as someone who has studied the primary sources and written a lot of books based on that and stuff, can you share with our audience something so they can compare what's happening now to the past? How did Islam spread so rapidly back at the time of Muhammad and his earliest successors throughout the Middle East and beyond into North Africa and other places?
Well, initially, Muhammad began his prophetic career in Mecca, and for quite a long time, most of his followers were fairly marginal people within the society, slaves or ex-slaves, quite poor people, and he and his movement were persecuted by the tribes people of Mecca, including his own relatives. So that was tough going, but he found partners in Medina. The Arabs in Medina, which was another city in what is now Saudi Arabia, welcomed his message, and they agreed to partner with him and to support him militarily and politically. So he moved to Medina with his followers, and Islam became the religion of Medina, and the Islamic State was established at that point. The Islamic calendar begins, year zero is the point of moving to Medina, establishing Islam there. And then Islam began to spread by conquest. So Mecca was conquered, and then all of Arabia was conquered. And within a century or two, most of the Middle East had been conquered as well. Persia was conquered, all of North Africa, right through into Spain. And then Armenia began to be attacked, and Egypt was conquered, Syria. So there was a very rapid military expansion, and that campaign continued for many centuries. Constantinople was defeated in the 15th century, and basically there was a very successful and rapid military expansion and an ongoing warfare with surrounding states. Hungary was occupied, Eastern Europe, and India was conquered. It was an extraordinarily successful military endeavors over centuries. The call to prayer, the daily call to prayer from the mosque, includes in its exhortations a promise of success. Come to success. Come to success is part of that invitation to pray each day. And it is true that Islam, as a political system, was extraordinarily successful for the first 1,000 or so years.
Okay. And you have written about two crises of Islam. What was the first crisis of Islam? Before we get to the second one, of course.
Well, Islam is a religion that promises success. It takes human nature's basic issue as being that people are easily led astray and they go on the wrong path, and it offers success to those that stay on the right path that's been given to humanity through the Prophet, through Muhammad. Now, that success includes political dominance and military success as well. But the problem for Islam, the first crisis, was that from about 1500 on, Western powers began to push back against Islamic rule, and they had success after success against the Muslim world. So just to mention some of those defeats that the Islamic world experienced, the Portuguese established an outpost, a colony in Goa in India. Christian Ethiopia, which had been conquered by Muslim Somalis some decades before, was liberated with the help of the Portuguese in 1543. The Ottomans were defeated at the gates of Vienna and pushed back, which resulted in the liberation of Hungary and Transylvania. Napoleon conquered Egypt in 1798. The US fought a long war, or a war for about 15 years in the early 19th century, to stop paying tribute to the Barbary states to prevent their citizens being enslaved, and they successfully stopped that. There were a lot of defeats of the Ottomans in their wars against the Russians for centuries, for 400 years. A number of Eastern European principalities were liberated, such as Romania, Serbia, Montenegro, Bulgaria. In Southeast Asia, the Portuguese, the Spanish, the Dutch, and the English defeated Muslim principalities. Mughal rule was destroyed in India by the British in 1857. The Ottoman Empire was dismantled after World War I. And finally, Israel was established in what had been considered Islamic heartland in Judea and Samaria. So these are centuries of defeats that the Muslim world experienced. And it was, from a theological view, quite shocking, because Islam promises success, and to be pushed back so comprehensively on just about every possible front, and to see most Muslim countries colonized, their capacity to wage war taken away, and to be so completely overwhelmed by Western nations who are considered to be Christian, this was a really profound theological crisis for the Muslim world. And at the same time, the position of Christians as minorities that by then living under Islamic rule were increasing through this period. So the Europeans put a lot of pressure on the Ottomans, for example, to improve the condition of Christians throughout the Ottoman Empire. And these improvements to the lived conditions of Christians under Islamic rule caused many Islamic scholars to be very distressed. And there's a number of fatwas and rulings, comments by Muslim scholars complaining from the 18th century on about the deplorable improvements in the standing and status of non-Muslims, which they said was caused by the weakness of Islam. So over about 400 to 500 years, Islam began to retreat. Its advances were stopped. Christianity was on the rise. And this was a huge theological crisis for the religion of success, the religion of dominance.
And of course, different Muslims are going to react differently to that, just as different Muslims have different mindsets today about what they should be doing or not doing, or if they should be, how much they should follow Muhammad or not follow Muhammad and all of that. But back when this was happening and this losing of these territories that the Muslims had overtaken through their jihad, what was the average Muslim response to this?
Well, there were some, like Ataturk in Turkey, who said basically West is best, and he adopted models from Europe to establish the Turkish constitution, and he sort of de-Islamicized Turkey and moved Turkey into the modern era. That was the result of the defeat of the Ottomans in the First World War. So there are movements like that, embracement of a more secular approach, embracing European models. And that you do see signs of that throughout the Muslim world, and a kind of an more enlightened period, I think, across the Islamic world. But the mainstream theological response, Ataturk's response was the de-theologizing of Turkish culture, to basically de-Islamicize it. But there's another response, which was to revive Islam. And the script that runs is something like this. Islam promises success. We're not successful. Allah is controlling all things. This is a sign that we are not following Islam strictly enough, because if we were committed to the right path, we would be successful. So what we should be doing is reviving Islam, being more faithful to Islam, and then we will once again be masters of the world. And so what you see is a whole series of movements across the Muslim world, beginning in the 18th century, to revive Islam and to restore its greatness. So the Wahhabi movement was such a movement, a revival movement in Arabia in the 18th century. The Deobandi movement began in what later became India and Pakistan. This dates from 1866 under British rule. Jamaat-e-Islamiyya was founded in 1941 in India, another revival movement. The Muslim Brotherhood, founded in 1928 in Egypt. The Iranian Revolution of 1979. Now, all these movements and their offshoots, such as the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, the Islamic State, Tablighi Jama'at, Hizb ut-Tahrir, all these groups share a script, which is that if we are faithful in following Islam, we will succeed. We will be dominant in the world again. Even the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, which is a kind of UN of Muslim states, this has as part of its constitution the statement that its goal is to revitalize Islam's pioneering role in the world, which is really a way of saying they want to re-establish Islam's dominant place in world affairs, its rightful place of being a dominant force in the world again today.
And Dr. Drury, I think all that information that you just gave to our viewers is helping them to make sense about when we point out to what the life of Muhammad was like, and then a lot of Muslims around the world don't, act like that today, especially here in America. We don't see a lot of Muslims, going out and doing what Muhammad did. And in the groups who do, like ISIS and Al-Qaeda, especially ISIS, of course, they wind up on the nightly news because they're so dichotomous from your average Muslim neighbor, coworker, etc. But we see all these different events that you just talked about explains this de-Islamization of certain territories. And then, of course, these revivalist groups who, because, of course, they're living at a time much later than Muhammad himself, of course, they have more modernization to a degree. But as we see, even with the Muslim Brotherhood, who was founded 4 years after the fall of the Ottoman Empire, Hassan al-Banna, he was willing to westernize, but not, he's willing to modernize, but not westernize. In other words, he was willing to, live like, with the technology that was around him at that time, but still saying, but hey, we're not westernizing, we're not trying to become non-Islamic, and in fact, the whole world needs to be under Islam, needs to be under Sharia. The whole world needs to be Dar al-Islam. And I think these are great pieces to the puzzle that people need to be aware of to explain why so many people today look to the time of Muhammad, they look to what's happening around the world today, and they say, okay, well, if every Muslim is supposed to be out there doing what Muhammad said to do, well, then why are so many not doing that? And I think it's a very interesting timeline, and I think this is something that a lot of people are really appreciating right now. Before we have to take a short break, I do want to point people to your website again. Please check this out during the break. Again, it's markjury.com. He has a lot of stuff there right at the top, books and DVDs, articles and interviews, videos and audios, blogs. You can donate to his work. You can help support the work that he does. He has some new books that are coming out in the near future. But again, The Third Choice, this is a great book that a lot of people look to. And of course, Sister Religions is a DVD that isn't too old. I believe just maybe a couple of years now. But that is great for people who like to watch a DVD rather than read a book. But people who do want to read books, you have The Third Choice. You have Liberty to the Captives. He has other books as well. So you can go to his website, markjury.com. You can go to amazon.com and get his resources there as well. But again, just check out his site because he's always putting out new blogs and articles and a lot of great information. And again, scholars like Dr. Dury are the people who we need to look to because he doesn't have a Muslim bias. He has a heart to reach Muslims with the gospel, just like every Christian does. But we need to be honest about Islam. And there are many people out there who just demonize everything. They don't just demonize the religion, they demonize the people. So they have no concern for Muslims or where they're going to end up after they die. They don't care about them. They just demonize everything. Of course, we have the other end of the spectrum where it's just all love, 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 and don't worry about studying Islam. You don't need to. Just love is all that matters. We just need to love people. And don't offend them, just love them, and don't criticize their religion. You have these two extremes, but we need to get into this healthy middle where we love Muslims, but we also are free to critique Islam. And that's what freedom of speech, of course, is all about, being able to criticize ideas and ideologies, religions, etc., that you don't agree with. And love the people, but again, critique the religio-political system known as Islam. We talk here all the time about Islam. We talk about how it's a religio-political system, a religion and a political ideology combined. You see, like in Saudi Arabia, where it's under full Sharia, it's the religion that influences the politics, not vice versa. And because of that, it's a spiritual issue. And a spiritual issue or spiritual problem requires a spiritual solution. And that's where the gospel comes in. That's why we need to be sharing the gospel with Muslims around us, regardless of where you live. But at the same time, study Islam. And if you meet a Muslim or a coworker, whoever, who seems very American, quote unquote, and they're not doing what Muhammad said to do, well, you definitely don't want to say, hey, you need to start doing this. You can be more like Muhammad. You just want to meet them where they are at and point them to the gospel from there. But at the same time, your Muslim neighbor doesn't define Islam. Muhammad defined Islam 1,400 years ago. And that's where we need to look to the primary sources. And the primary sources are where Dr. Dury looks when he writes his books, which, again, we do want to encourage you to get. So we do have to take a short break. Please stay right where you are, though, because we'll be back in just a few minutes for more Colliding Worldviews.
Get ready for the International Apologetics Marathon as the first day of the marathon launches on October 2nd. For 7 days, with attention-grabbing and educational apologetic shows that will equip you with everything that you need to know regarding topics such as Islam, political and ISIS, debates, as well as learning how to defend the faith of Christianity. Enjoy daily live shows that are 2 hours long each, with your host Tony Gourlay. Professors with PhDs, pastors and ministry leaders, politicians, and world-renowned speakers who specialize in the several topics on Islam and Christian apologetics will be participating in this marathon. For more information, please call the numbers at your screen or visit our website at trinitychannel.com. ABN has expanded to the digital tree, meaning that we have spread onto multiple platforms and have developed several channels in over 4 different languages: Arabic, English, Sudat, and Kurdish. On top of those channels, more are on the way before the year's end. In addition to the growth of the channels, the platforms are spreading as well. The digital tree has over 25 platforms that you can view our channels on, several IPTV boxes, 5 digital media players, 3 satellites, almost any popular mobile device, 4 websites to view our shows, and 8 smart TVs and counting. The easiest way to experience a digital tree is through our Facebook or websites. For Facebook, just head over to one of our main pages, ABNSat TV or Trinity Channel, and click this link to take you to the tree. On our websites, abnsat.com or trinitychannel.com, just click on the Digital Tree tab near the top of the page and you can start exploring right away. Years of evangelism, apologetics, and testimonies to the Lord are at your fingertips. Grasp it and know the Lord's message. To view what devices a digital tree is on, go to one of our websites and click on How to Watch, or call the number on your screen to speak with a member of ABN.
The digital tree is now accessible through our Facebook page. Go to Trinity Channel's Facebook and click on the first post that says, "Click here to start experiencing the digital tree today." That link will take you to our website, and from there it's as simple as clicking on what you want to watch. For more information, call the number on your screen or visit our website at trinitychannel.com.
Hello friends, welcome back to ABN's Trinity Channel for another episode of Colliding Worldviews. Today our topic is Islam's growing crisis, and my great guest is Dr. Mark Dury. Again, check out his website, markdury.com. You can pick up his book, The Third Choice. You can pick up his DVD, Sister Religions, What You Should Know About Islam, which covers another great topic, which hopefully we have time to get to today. If not, we'll have to book Dr. Dury for another show in the future. As you can hear, he knows his stuff, and you're going to get a lot more than we can present in this show in his different resources that he has. Again, all of his books and his DVD. Dr. Dury, what was happening in the West at the same time as this de-Islamization of these certain territories in the East?
Well, you have the de-Islamicization, so the influence of the West is causing Muslim nations to become more secular and more open to the rest of the world. And then you have the great Islamic awakening, a reformation within Islam to restore it back to its roots. And so you have the rise of all these movements, such as the Islamic Revolution in Iran and the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt and other parts of the world. And you see all across the Muslim world, Muslim women putting on the veil again. You see a move towards stricter Sharia implementation in Pakistan, and a sense of hope amongst the Muslim world that Islam will become the great success story again. Now, at the same time that this is happening, that the Muslim world is seeking to revive Islam and make it a powerful force in the world, at the same time as the Islamic awakening, the West is retreating. So you get decolonization, you get an intellectual trend of critiquing colonialism, a lot of self-doubt amongst Western intellectuals about the contribution of the West. You also have the decline of Christianity in the West. In some parts of the West, in some parts of Europe, almost a complete de-Christianization, and the decline of confidence in Christian heritage. And so you get this kind of perfect storm where Islam is on the rise, where Islam is awakening to its possibilities to rule the world again. And at the same time in the West, particularly in Europe, you get a profound sense of doubt about Christianity. You get also deep changes being brought about by technology. For example, the advent of birth control and the reduction in birth rates in Europe, leading to a need to augment the population by bringing in migrants. So a growing immigration into Europe, for example, and other Western countries of Muslims, and very significant minorities in some cases rising. And these are minorities. So, for example, in France, where perhaps 1 in every 3 children being born is now Muslim, you have a rising Muslim minority with a vision or a dream for the future of revived power and influence, at the same time that the dominant society, the Western society around them, is losing confidence in itself and losing confidence in its values and its history. And that's a really interesting combination of factors that make really for instability. You might say civilizational instability in the West.
It definitely is, and we have seen this de-Christianization of Europe, and that has left a vacuum for whatever group wants to take power, wants to influence people around them the most. We've seen this Islamization of the United Kingdom. Actually, a show that we did a couple of years ago. We also did a Islamization of Canada show, and actually we probably need to do a Islamization of Australia show sometime in the future as well. But we are seeing this throughout the world. And again, I want to let our viewers know that these dots that are being connected for you now, from the time of Muhammad up until 400, 500 years ago, that is the whole reason for the Middle East, for Israel, for other countries around that area, and even America to a degree, not being under Islam today, not being under Sharia. That is the ultimate goal of Islam. That's for the whole world to be under Sharia. And as we see these different countries like Canada and other places, get so big on political correctness, don't offend Muslims, don't criticize Muhammad, don't criticize Islam, any of that stuff. Dr. Dury, I keep telling people, I don't know if people realize this or not, they probably don't, but all they're doing when they do that is implementing aspects of Sharia upon themselves, because if they were living under Sharia, they also wouldn't be able to criticize Islam or Muhammad or the Quran, correct?
Yes, that's right. You could call it Sharia by the back door. So Islamic law forbids criticism of Islam, either by Muslims or non-Muslims. And what's happening is, in the name of religious tolerance, in the name of tolerance and multicultural coexistence, Western countries have been introducing laws to basically to criminalize criticism of Islam. So Canada has introduced a law to ban criticism specifically of Islam and not of other religions. This is quite extraordinary, and it's a very interesting partnership, really, of Western multicultural ideology and self-doubt about the Christian tradition in the West, at the same time as Islam itself is rising in confidence, and so you get this pressure from the Muslim community asking for Sharia-like restraints on freedom of speech, and then the Western societies accept this pressure and implement those restrictions in the name of multiculturalism and in the name of tolerance. This is a pretty toxic combination, a perfect storm, really, and quite a destructive trend, and it doesn't bode well for the future of these countries. It's a pathway, really, to religious conflict, to civil war, and to a dissolution of the values that have made Western societies reasonably stable and successful.
And we're being hit from multiple angles, because you have the OIC, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, which I believe is 56 nations, including the Palestinian Authority, who've been working for years to criminalize Islamophobia. And that's exactly what we're hearing around a lot of different countries. So, oh, you're an Islamophobe, especially if you know what you're talking about. But I found out, Dr. Dury, that most people who use the term Islamophobic in an accusatory way are usually faxophobic, because they haven't read your book, they haven't read the primary sources, and they don't like to admit what actual Islamic history shows. And we're seeing that. We're seeing the don't offend. We're seeing this slow Islamization or creeping Sharia. And as we know, the law is Sharia is always on the side of the most devout. So even if there are a ton of moderate Muslims around, are they going to stand up to the jihadists? No, they're going to do what they say. And people say, hey, ISIS, they're not Islamic because they're killing Muslims, but you're technically begging the question, because ISIS would say, well, no, they're not Muslims. That's why we're killing them. They're not only supposed to, they don't only kill Jews and Christians, but they're supposed to kill hypocrites according to Islam, and people who say that they're Muslims but really aren't. And we're seeing that happening. And yeah, like I said, it's just being hit from multiple angles here. So moving on to the next crisis, because people need to know about this too. What was Islam, or what is Islam's second crisis?
Well, the first crisis is Islam is declining because of the success of the West. The second crisis is you have the solution, that is that Islam should become more strict, that you awaken an Islamic consciousness, imply stricter vision of Sharia. So you overthrow the Shah in Iran, who was trying to modernize and secularize Iran, and implement strict Islam in Iran. So you have the Iranian Revolution, the Ayatollahs take over, and Sharia law becomes the law of the land. The second crisis is that this solution begins to look pretty bad after a while. The people are told they're going to have freedom when Islam becomes dominant, and they get it. They get Islam, but they don't get freedom, and they see corruption increase. They see cruelty increase. Society becomes more oppressive, and then people begin to doubt Islam altogether. So you offer Islam as the solution for decades, and you say, if only we have strict Islam, then all the problems will be resolved. That was the Muslim Brotherhood slogan in Egypt: Islam is the solution. But when the Muslim Brotherhood take over, the population are groaning under their yoke, and there was a wildly enthusiastically received military coup in Egypt to overthrow the Muslim Brotherhood. And within a very short period of time of stricter Islamic rule under the Brotherhood, the people of Egypt rebelled against it and rejected it. We see in Iran today that hundreds of thousands of young Iranian people are wanting to leave Islam. They're wanting to choose their own religion, and many are becoming Christians. The Iranian government's very anxious about that, and they actually reject Islam before they turn to Christ. They identify Islam as the cause of the problem. And at first it seemed that some of these revival movements were successful. Some Muslims said, look, the jihad in Afghanistan overthrew the Soviet Union. We can destroy the Soviet Union. We can destroy America. We can take over the world. But the problem is, every time these movements actually gain power, they produce destruction and pain. And so you see the backwardness of the Taliban, the corruption of how the Iranian Revolution has worked out, the failure of the Muslim Brotherhood when they took power in Egypt, the increasing economic problems and difficulties in Turkey under the Islamist Prime Minister Erdogan. Another Islamist revival regime is Khartoum, Sudan. They've managed to kill more than 1 million of their own people in civil wars, trying to implement strict Sharia. And then the crowning disaster is the Iraqi and Syrian jihadi bloodbaths, which has just destroyed nations. And so now you have this situation where Muslims are questioning Islam. They've heard people say Islam is the solution. They experienced the so-called solution, and it's much worse than the problems that were being addressed by the revolution. And so they say, well, if that's the case, then Islam is probably the problem. And you see the second crisis of Islam is a rejection of Islam by Muslims based on the failure of the solution that's offered. And the problem is Islamic states are failing. So if you look, for example, at human development indices, there's no Muslim country in the top 25 nations for Muslim for human development indices. That is basic health of human existence. And if you exclude the oil-driven economies such as Qatar and Emirates and the Saudis, the actual economic output of Muslim states is very low. I think it was Bernard Lewis that pointed out that, excluding oil, if you combine all the economic output of the Muslim countries in the Middle East together, put it together, it's less than that of Finland's. If you exclude countries that have sizable non-Muslim populations like Malaysia or countries like Kuwait with a lot of oil, The most developed Muslim nation in the world is Azerbaijan, which is number 79 in terms of human development indices. So Muslim populations in Muslim societies are suffering. They're not having the opportunities they deserve that most people have. They are the poorest nations in the world. They're not succeeding. Egypt is declining. It's worse in its economy and its capacity to feed itself now than it was 30, 40 years ago. It's the largest wheat exporter in the world. It's dependent on other nations just to gain enough food. So you've got all these problems happening across the Muslim world, failure after failure. Even countries like Bosnia, a Muslim country, is much lower in its human development indices than Catholic Croatia or Orthodox Serbia. So wherever you can make a contrast between Muslim population and non-Muslim population, Muslims are doing badly, and when there's radical Islam that takes over to bring its much heralded solution, it's actually disastrous. Things get worse. So this is causing a profound crisis of confidence across the Muslim world, and this is looking very bad. So one of the effects of this is that today in Germany, which has taken in many hundreds of thousands of refugees from Iraq and Syria, churches are overflowing with Muslims who want to become Christians. My friends that I know that are doing missions work in countries like Lebanon and in Jordan and on the coasts of Greece and so on, they report very large numbers of Muslims wanting to leave Islam, seeking an alternative religion for themselves. One of the fastest growing Christian churches in the world is the Iranian church. The Iranian government is very worried about the fact that young people are rejecting Islam in droves. It's a declining minority, I would say, of young Iranians that have any desire to be Islamic these days. So Islam is proving itself to be the problem. It's one thing to be defeated by infidels and to have your religion, its kind of supremacist claims trashed by the outsiders. It's another thing when your own people, when your own Islamic leaders gain power and they implement an Islamic system like in Iran, and that fails. And this is causing a really profound crisis across the Islamic world, and particularly in the heartlands of Islam, particularly in the Middle East.
And this is music to a lot of people's ears because they want to reach Muslims and they don't really know how. But here's the thing, folks. A lot of Muslims throughout the world are already doubting not only the faith itself, but of course, also what life is like when you're living under Sharia. And they look to the West, and of course, many have the misconception that the U.S. is Christian, quote unquote, and that means every single American is Christian. We have a lot of nominal Christians in America as well. Of course, it was founded upon Judeo-Christian principles, but it's not an actual representative of Christianity. But we as Christians do want to be sharing the gospel with Muslims around us. And that's the thing. They're already leaving, even if they don't hear the gospel, because of the problems that they see within the religion itself and living under Sharia. And as you know, today with the internet, being able to look up the primary sources and actually seeing what the life of Muhammad was like. And people saying, hey, if this is supposedly the perfect man and the perfect Muslim, well, that doesn't make any sense at all. So I'm just going to leave this thing. But the thing is that if a Muslim leaves Islam, they become an atheist. Well, yeah, that's a good thing. But it's really just making this world a better place to go to hell from. Because we're all going to die. We're all going to stand before God. And a Muslim will ultimately end up in hell for the same reason that an atheist does, and a Mormon, a Jehovah's Witness, or just a skeptic who's never repented and put their trust in Christ. Because that last thing I just said is the exact thing that people need to do. Repent and put their trust in Christ. The common denominator is that we have human beings who are made in the image of God, who've sinned against a holy God, and they need a Savior. But the salvation is only possible through repentance and faith in Christ. And that's why the gospel needs to be shared with all Muslims, those who are doubting the faith already, but also those who think that everything's fine. But they still need the gospel as well. So we want to be sharing the gospel with everyone out there around us. And Dr. Dury, I want to ask you, in general, what does the future hold for Islam as a religion, for Muslims as people, and just from what we're seeing around the world today and this creeping Sharia that we're seeing in many different countries?
You will see contradictory trends in different places. So it's quite feasible that Islam will decline very considerably in, say, Iran. I've spoken to many young Iranians, and they are so determined to choose their own religion. They want to make their own choice. They understand choice. You could say the ideology of choice that permeates the world today has reached them, and they're able to say, I want to choose, in a way that 50 years ago young Iranians would have never had that thought, really. So on the one hand, you see the possibility that a country like Iran could become a Christian nation in the next 50 years. And on the other hand, you see some people digging in, so some radical Muslims becoming more and more determined to keep on hammering their heads against the wall to prove that radical Islam is the solution. So you have the people fighting in the jihad in the Middle East, in Syria and Iraq. You also see a competition happening between different Islamic groups for who will prove the success of Islam. So you've got the Iranians on the one hand squaring off against the Saudis or the Salafists and battling for supremacy, battling for prestige. So the Middle East will become more and more conflicted on fault lines. And it's not just a battle for power, it's a battle for who has the true Islam, who has the Islam that will prove that Islam can rule and can be dominant in the world today. And so the Middle East is looking more and more unstable. You've got countries like Saudi Arabia who have invested in a particular radical vision of Islam, a Salafist view, actually a jihadi view of the world. But this ideology is now coming back to bite them. So they're being threatened by jihadi groups that have bought their propaganda, but are saying, yes, but we want to overthrow you as well. And so you have conflicts arising between the Saudis and Qatar, which has been sponsoring the Muslim Brotherhood, which is now a threat to the Saudis. So you see that a kind of intensification of this desperate desire to prove that Islam is right, that it's the great answer for the world's problems, increasing evidence that it's not, increasing evidence of failure, increasing desperation because of economic stagnation and lack of economic success, and at the same time, whole populations turning away from Islam. One of the really remarkable trends of the last 30 years has been the development of movements to Christ among Muslim communities, and these are multiplying, where thousands of people of one ethnic group or one national group are turning to Christianity, and this is happening all over the Muslim world in a way that's been unprecedented in 1400 years. At the same time, in Europe, you see increasingly aggressive Islamic minorities, more and more determined to implement Sharia, to exercise, to flex their muscles, Western cultures that have lost confidence and struggling. You see the destabilization of political systems in the West, where the traditional tension between left and right, say in countries like Holland, is being overtaken by new parties anxious about Muslim immigration, the breakdown of political systems in the West. Even the EU itself is the European community is being threatened by anxieties about immigration. So a lot of destabilization, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of doubt, confusion. At the same time, extraordinary opportunities for the gospel. And there will be increased conflict. There will be more wars in the Middle East. There'll also be the risk of increasing destabilization in different countries in Europe, and at the same time, rising hope and very deep changes, a potential for nations that are now Islamic to actually change their religion. These are long-term trends, and if the current trends continue, the religious map of the Middle East of Europe is going to be changing very radically and in profound ways. It's very exciting times, disturbing times, unnerving times. This is a time for Christians to be bold and confident about their vision for the world and about what Christ offers. So, I mean, I think it's a really exciting time to be alive, even though there'll be lots of challenges and some very painful times ahead as well.
Definitely. And you've been very informative, Dr. Dury, to our viewers. I know that they want more, so I want to point our viewers to your website, markdury.com. Check out a specific article on there. It's called Islam's Second Crisis, The Troubles to Come. And this was actually written a few years ago, February 13th of 2014. You can find that article on his website. Gives you a little bit more, of course, a lot more details, dates, and details about what we've been talking about today. But again, check out his books, The Third Choice, Islam, Dhimitude, and Freedom. He has another book called Liberty to the Captives, Freedom from Islam and Dhimitude Through the Cross. And of course, his newest book, Which God? Jesus, Holy Spirit, God in Christianity and Islam. So I would recommend to you to get all of these resources. Again, you don't have to. You can go to his website and just read articles and stuff like that too. And if you just want to watch a DVD, go ahead and get Sister Religions. It's called Sister Religions, What You Should Know About Islam. And that is a great DVD as well. So please check out these resources. Check out his website. And most importantly, reach out to the Muslims around you. It's great to know and to be encouraged by Dr. Dury and be informed that, look, Muslims are already doubting a lot of stuff, whether it's their sincerity or their belief about, what they think is going to happen after they die, how they need to be living their life now. They have doubts about the religion of Islam in general. Is it a good thing? Are countries that are under full Sharia actually places where people are trying to move to? We actually see the opposite of that. We see many Muslims who want to get into Western countries. Now, what's the purpose of that? It's because either they want the freedom that is not available under Sharia, or, of course, you also have that factor is there as well of a modern-day hijrah of them basically doing what Muhammad said to do and just trying to spread Islam, of course, in a little bit different way right now than the way Muhammad did it himself. But again, the ultimate goal of Orthodox Sunni Islam is to have the world under Sharia, and that happens as Muslims move throughout the world. And again, we need to compare your Muslim neighbors today to the life of Muhammad, to what we've been talking about in this show. And again, that helps explain why people are still not doing today what Muhammad said to do. Of course, some people are, but not everybody is. Why is that? These are the dots that need to be connected to let us know the ultimate goals of the religion and what people are obeying the rules, what people are not obeying the rules of Muhammad, of that is, of course, and very important information. So please go to markdury.com. Dr. Mark Dury, I want to thank you so much for being on the show and for your time, for these resources, and for all the stuff that you have on your website. You have a whole lot of stuff there, and I know that our viewers are really going to enjoy working their way through it.
Thank you, Tony. It's been a real pleasure to be on the show with you.
Well, we hope to have you back again, so we'll be talking about that. Friends, please check out markdury.com. And, of course, please continue to pray for ABN and the Trinity channel and support this network financially, which will allow these shows to continue. This show that you just saw is being is flowing through satellite to the Middle East, North Africa, Australia, New Zealand, United States, Canada. It's on all kinds of internet-based devices and Apple and Android phones. You can get a free app to watch all this stuff, to watch the 50 channels on the ABN's digital tree. We have a ton of stuff, and it's only available because of you. When you give and support ABN and the Trinity channel, we try to give back as much as we can with all of our weekly shows, with our marathons, with all of our technology that we're continuing to grow onto, and doing these shows with great content, great guests like Dr. Mark Dury. And I want to thank you for being with us today. Please stay tuned to ABN and the Trinity channel for our other weekly shows. And, of course, come right back here at the same time next Monday for another episode of Colliding Worldviews.